Back in 2019, Samsung released their first generation Galaxy Fold, which was supposed to be the future. The phone released to the press and quickly had a lot of problems which were fixed, and about 5 months later, Samsung released the phone to the public, the first folding phone. After that, Samsung released their flip version of the phone, and they renamed the phones to the Galaxy Z line of phones, as a contrast to the Galaxy S line of phones which were released about 10 years prior. The folding phones started to gain popularity, and now Samsung is on their 4th generation of the fold-out design, and the 5th generation is expected to come out later this summer. Are these phones worth purchasing though, and what flaws do they still have even after almost 5 generations of work? Using a folding phone is a much different experience than a normal slate-like phone. The phone unfolds out to a 7.6-inch OLED 120Hz panel, which looks overall pretty good. The displays are typical Samsung displays, vibrant colors, good quality, and overall not bad at all. There are a few problems that folding displays have always had though. I'm going to go through those right now. The first problem comes from the material that the display is made out of. There may be a thin, flexible layer of glass somewhere inside of the display, like Samsung advertises, but the part of the display that's being interacted with is plastic. It scratches very easily, like plastic, and I got this unit used off of eBay for a pretty good price. And since I got it, I actually put a scratch in it while cleaning it. There is apparently a built-in screen protector on this phone, but it seems like it's non-removable, so I would consider that part of the display's structure. Samsung advertises against using third-party screen protectors, but it doesn't really seem to damage the display if installed properly. The second problem, which also relates to the material, is durability. The displays are not durable, and they have little to no impact resistance. This is not as big of an issue as it sounds, as the weaker internal display is covered up when it folds closed, but it still is a problem considering that the display can't really take an impact. The third problem is one that will likely happen no matter how careful the user is with the device, the crease. It seems to get worse depending on how much use the display is seen, because the plastic getting folded and unfolded seems to slowly wear down the plastic. At least that's what I assume is happening here, and it makes this annoying visible crease. There are probably ways to protect the crease from getting wear over time, like storing the phone open rather than closed, but my device seems to have a relatively bad crease mark, which is really annoying honestly. Some users have reported the crease getting cracks down the middle, which doesn't seem to be an issue with mine yet. But with that said, on my phone there are a ton of scratches going down the middle. They don't look to be cracks yet though. Those problems are all specific to folding phones, but for a lot of people the problems are worth dealing with to get a better display in a smaller phone. One area that I haven't talked about intentionally is the front screen. That's because on my unit the front screen is currently smashed. I'm getting this replaced on the phone in the next couple of days, but the front screen could be seen as a compromise or benefit, seeing as in one way it does a worse job at being a normal flat panel than a normal phone, but in another way it gives the phone a full-featured flat panel to use one-handed and without even opening the entire phone up. I've used the front display on another Z Fold 3, and it seemed nice, but typing was hard, and seeing as it's probably the narrowest and tallest phone display that I've ever tried using, that makes sense. A few small problems which don't exactly have to do with folding phones are the under-display camera for one. It makes the front-facing camera really bad, and it does a bad job at convincing me that there's no camera there, as the area of the display where the camera is at seems to be very pixelated. The second problem is the fingerprint scanner being put in the power button instead of under the display like many phones were back then and still are. I'm not sure if this is due to the folding technology being incapable of supporting this feature, or Samsung not wanting to have to put in 2 under-display fingerprint scanners on the cover display and on the folding display. This phone's specs are pretty good too. I have a Galaxy Z Fold 3 here, and for a phone released in mid-2021, it was very good. 12GB of RAM, which is double what my iPhone 14 Pro has, 256GB of storage on the base model, which is double what any of the base model iPhone 14s have, Wi-Fi 6E, which iPhones still have yet to introduce, and a number of other specs that seem to be shared with the Galaxy S21 Ultra, also from 2021. Battery runtime on these phones is supposed to be pretty long, but my specific unit has a degraded battery, so it doesn't really last that long at all. Other brands, such as Google, have also started making folding phones. The Google Pixel Fold seems to be a good concept, but seeing its price and how outdated it looks compared to the nearly year-old Galaxy Z Fold 4 makes me think that Google should have worked on the Pixel Fold for a while longer. There's also a completely different type of folding phone, which is the flip type. It resembles old flip phones, and it's a pretty cool concept, but it lacks purpose as they typically don't have as good of specs, and they need to be flipped open to really be used. And honestly, they're not all that useful to me. Flip-style phones are good to save space, but the cover display on them is typically pretty bad. Motorola has been the best at this because they put a nearly full-featured version of Android on their Razr's cover display. Flip-style phones are pretty good to save space, but the cover display on them is typically pretty bad. Seems like Motorola has been the best at this because they put a nearly full-featured version of Android on their Razr's cover display, but it's still less than half of a normal phone's display size, and it seems to be pretty inconvenient to use. The battery life also seems to suffer on flip phones as there's not really as much space to put a large battery in one of those phones. Another aspect where the flip type phones fall short on is the camera, as they also lack the space to have a big camera. With all that said, the phones seem like they should be a pretty low price, but they're typically just as much, if not more, than a decent flagship slate phone like the iPhone 14s. With that said, I think that folding phones are far from a failure, and I think that they still have a long way to go. Whether or not everyone will switch to a folding phone in the next couple of years remains to be seen, but if Apple releases a folding phone of some sort, I think that's when the market will fully switch to the folding design, as Apple is seen as a leader in design by the phone industry. I also think that eventually, slate phones will get interesting again, and it'll go from flip phones or folding phones back to slate phones like they did in 2007. So thank you for watching, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, a like would be appreciated, and goodbye.